So this might be one of the good news slides in our presentation.
Yeah.
It might
Could you
be
mark
worth,
that one for number 1, please? That's
it might
Move that
be
to the
worth a
beginning of the
pause just to
presentation.
reflect that where we can, we're proposing to do things in the community and to be responsive to some of the issues. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the kind of a dire situation, in my opinion, with respect to that boat launch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're going to get after it. But we will try to find other ways to fund it as well so that we can further leverage the PIF. We've discussed the Heartwood property and have actually already taken action on that. There's a little bit of PIF use just for some closing costs and things like that potentially. And the other is the Sandy swimming hole. You've had some conversation before about that. It's very popular in the summertime, kind of an untenable parking and pedestrian scenario that happens out there. And this capital effort would mitigate, we would completely mitigate that and make that a much more safe and enjoyable recreation spot. Perfect use for PIF funds. I think it's really good news. And it doesn't expend all of your PIF funds, but it takes the pressure off in terms of that, we got to spend it in doing some things that are responsive to needs in the community.
All right. And then, I know you all know what PEG stands for, but for those that may not, we have itemized out that it stands for the Public Educational and Governmental Access Channels Fund. Basically, we get revenue off from Comcast. And again, it's restricted for educational purposes, and informational. So we use those funds for our website for the most part. So we're going to look into enhancing that to make it more informative and educational for the citizens to be able to go and find information. That brings us to, hopefully, all right, I'm on the right side. What we're going to do is we're going to have each department head provide you some of the highlights of their budget request. So we're starting with fire. So Chief Schumacher, you're up.
Thank you, Jennifer. When RJ asked me to list the department highlights, it was very brief because we do not have any. I'm proposing for 2011. What we're going to do is maintain our current staffing levels at 2 firefighters on duty 24 hours a day. We're going to maintain our staff certifications, and just because of the economic conditions and the passage of the MS levy, we're able to do that. So I think it's cut our budget a little bit. We've gone to some web-based classes in lieu of sending people to conferences and that kind of thing to cut the numbers down and get the budget to where it's at. Any questions or anything?
Okay. Chief Mitchell.
Our budget is pretty much a maintenance budget. We've added, or would like to fill the vacant position we have with the traffic position. Traffic is probably the #1 complaint that is sent to me, and it's difficult to try and do that in day-to-day calls and whatnot. So this would try and address traffic complaints that we see on the city, do a better job of doing that. So far as required training, basically we're just down to the officers have to have so many hours of training per year. There's, and quite honestly, most of that would be dedicated to detective training, things that they will need to do to build up their level of expertise. Anything for a drug-related comes out of K-9, so that's not part of that. So it's maintaining what we have, try to identify this year just exactly what do we need for training for next year and factor that in so there shouldn't be any surprises there. Any questions?
Community development.
I'm going to cover community development this evening for Joanne. Similarly to the previous 2 department budgets in terms of highlights, this is a maintenance budget, but actually it's consummating some staff decrease that we've already done. We moved an inspection person into one of the utility funds to fill a vacancy there, and that reduction was primarily workload related. The training budget contains staff certifications for inspection and plan review and building official type certifications. I would point out that it's a constrained professional services budget. As you know, one of the economic development tools that we have is our planning, and we undertake different plans, and we've all talked about some different plans that could provide some benefit to the community, but they require investment. And at this time, the budget is constrained in this department, in this area. We do the best we can with the current staff to tackle those types of issues and do what we can, but there's not a lot of money in there to go out and have some folks help us with that.
Dave, on the professional services piece, there's been discussion in the last 6 months about hiring engineers to be on in-house versus the amount of dollars we send to Wallace Engineering or that. Where have you guys come up? Where have you gone with that one? In other words, you know, we're spending $1.5 million, and I'm just going to grab a number out of the air, but for Wallace, and we could certainly hire engineers for cheaper than that to do certain aspects of the job. What evaluation have you guys done for that?
Done quite a bit of work on that. In fact, Jim has done a lot of the heavy lifting on that, done some really solid analysis. I think the conclusion is that we could do a city engineer. Where we would leverage most savings would be in the utilities and not in the general street and fire fund. So it's not a silver bullet, if you would, to our general street and fire fund problem. And we would continue to have professional services because some of the mandates that come on us are so specialized that the generalist type engineer that you could bring into a municipal environment might be able to be an expert in one of those areas and the generalist in the others, but definitely not an expert in all of those specialties. So we continue to need to have professional services dollars. We decided not to move that position in with this budget because there's a little bit more analysis that we need to do, and it doesn't significantly alter the bottom line. It does, but it's not significant. And catch our breath after the budget. I think you'll see us potentially bringing a recommendation to you. Does that sum it up? I think that's.
I think so. I think, you know, the amount of savings really wasn't to the point where we thought we were able to move forward, especially in this economic time right now. And there is some value engineering savings when, you know, a professional engineer looks at, you know, a capital facilities plan or a project that comes forward. I think there's some real savings there to say, hey, we don't have to do A, B, and C. We only need to do A and B. We don't have to do C. So I think there is some savings, but difficult to quantify.
Part of the perception of the savings has been around the aggressiveness of the capital plan in recent years, and so there's been quite a high level of engagement of the engineer, and the aggressiveness of the capital plan is slowing down a little bit over the next several years, so that gets to why the savings isn't as dramatic as potentially it would be. But
Well, your comments are telling me, though, and tells the citizens that we are looking at that. Because initially, when we looked at that, wow, what a high number that must be.